Hey, Guy Powell here, and welcome to the next episode of the Backstory on Marketing and AI. And if you haven't already done so, please visit prorelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. I am the author of the upcoming book, The AI Marketing Machine, and you can find out more information on that at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. Today, I'm interviewing Alan Mosca of N-Plan, and let me tell you a little bit about him. He is the co-founder and CTO of N-Plan, and he leads AI innovation in construction project forecasting and impacting almost $500 million in projects annually. Wow. With a PhD in computer science and deep fintech and AI expertise, he offers sharp, actionable insights for founders, VCs, and industry leaders on scaling AI in complex, slow-moving sectors. Alan, great to have you. Welcome.
It's great to be on. Thanks so much, Guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us your background in AI. What's your backstory there?
Yeah, my backstory starts a long time ago where I used to work in what most people would call high frequency trading. And whilst I was doing that, I did a part-time master's and PhD in machine learning theory. So I start from the roots of machine learning, and then I got to the end of that and decided to abandon finance completely and co-founded N-Plan with my co-founder to solve a problem that was way more into the physical world. And this is probably a common pattern that you see a lot in people that leave finance. They go deeply in the other direction, or like, what is the most physical thing that I can do? Because you spend so much time living in the abstract. And so I start from machine learning theory and thinking about how do models learn. And I lived through the arrival of transformers and GPT models through the research lens. So then N-Plan came as a natural evolution of this, where we looked at what is one of the hardest problems in society right now. And we kind of gravitated mostly. My co-founder brought his personal experience about having lived through some projects that were delayed and severely over budget. But also, we founded the company in 2017, and that was like a particular time in the UK because we had a few very large projects that were starting to quote unquote blow up. There was the largest contractor in the country went bust overnight. That destroyed 70,000 jobs. So it was very relevant at the time that we were looking at what should we do. And the other thing that I found, I cannot use the word surprising, and you'll see why in a second, but I found very sad, is that I can walk up to anyone in any city in the world and say, most projects, varying definition of most, but typically you say more than 80% of projects, cost more than double what they were planned to cost and take more than double the amount of time, right? And then everyone responds with an example of a project in their city. Now, I don't know of one in Atlanta, but that's because I haven't done the research. And I'm sure that you can probably think of one. But the sad part is that in 8 years of doing this, nobody has looked at me as if I was crazy when I say this, right? So that seems like a problem that's worth solving because it is so bad that humanity has just worked itself into acceptance, right? So we've gone through the whole grieving process already, and we've accepted that this is just the way it is. And it really shouldn't be, right? Because the same people that are planning the project are the ones doing it. So we started uncovering a lot of things on how do you execute projects, and we kept coming back to this notion of there's somewhere, usually on a project of sufficient size, and I know that you're doing a house renovation, probably there isn't one, but there is, I guess, an implicit one that is in somebody's head, maybe yours, maybe a project manager, but there will be some form of schedule, right? And that schedule effectively is a Gantt chart of varying from like a couple hundred activities to the largest projects could have hundreds of thousands of activities on a single Gantt chart. Now, if I give you, and this is probably true in many projects in the world right now, and this is where the sweet spot with our customers is, if I give you a project that's let's say, roughly $20 billion and has a integrated master schedule, which is a very high level document in terms of the work that you're doing, that has 50,000 activities on it. An activity might be a whole concrete pour, so they won't be broken down in phases or anything like that. And all these things are connected together. And then I give you a project management team that's like 90 people, which is typical in this sort of setup. It is practically impossible to coordinate that thing. And it's also, I'm going to say, extremely unlikely. And by extremely unlikely, I mean less than the probability of flipping heads on a coin 100,000 times in a row, that everything will go according to plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that the way we set them up, which is incredibly deterministic, is that we say California High-Speed Railway, which may or may not end up how it is planned to end up, but California High-Speed Railway will open on this date, right? And I don't know the date, but there will be a document somewhere with a schedule that says this is the day that we cut the ribbon and the first train comes in. And that will be years in the future, but that is entirely dependent on getting everything.
Well, I have to interrupt
the
you
way
there.
you planned it.
Yeah, it's actually years in the past.
There we go, right?
And it'll never get there.
I mean, with sufficient will and stubbornness, you can get anything there. So I'm not going to bet that it won't happen, but will it cost what the original proposition was,
Yeah.
and will it take the amount of time that it was supposed to take? And there's lots of, I mean, I don't want to pick on California High-Speed Rail, but you know, we have basically the exact same project in the UK, and it goes through the same struggles.
Yeah.
The reality is that assumption is wrong. That assumption is wrong because you're doing so many things. Each one of those things has so much uncertainty in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as something goes wrong, these are like very, very long linear sequences.
Yep.
As soon as something goes wrong, it starts affecting everything else, which then means that not only things start pushing out in terms of delay, but also there's correlations, right? And so like a simple example is if we have a problem with excavation for a foundation, we have a concrete delivery that's booked to pour that foundation. We have to change that concrete delivery. That concrete delivery might not be available for a very long time, or we forget to change it. Trucks show up. You have to dump the concrete somewhere, and you can't dump it in the foundation that you just dug. So you have to go, I don't know where it gets dumped, usually not in a great place, but because you can't keep the concrete in the truck for so long.
Right.
And so that's just like a very simple example, but you can see how this just balloons completely out of control. And so what we decided to do is, fortunately, there are data sets of like, this is the initial schedule and this is how it finished. And the reason why there are these as-built schedules, is what they're called, is because you can imagine that in this industry, the favorite pastime in the last 3 years of the project is litigation. So there are enormous lawsuits and damages claims, etc., and blame gets pushed around for years all over the place. At some point, there's some sort of settlement that's reached. But in preparation for that process happening on pretty much everything, the schedules are updated with information about what's happened at every step of the way. That makes a great data set for machine learning. So that's what we ended up building, is we ended up building a forecasting system that tells you the uncertainty of executing any activity on a Gantt chart. And then you combine them all and you get the final uncertainty of the completion milestone. And you can do all the milestones in the middle, but you know, if you think about completion milestone, and then it becomes a function of all of those things. And we've built a software platform on top of that where the project management teams come in and find alternative ways of mitigating the risk effectively, right? So that may be you generate different options for executing the project. You get in front of things that may have high uncertainty, or you de-scope some stuff. Sometimes you're like, well, we're building a roundabout, but do we need the flower bed in the middle to open the roundabout? No, right? Just leave the weeds. Who cares?
Yeah.
And then do the flower bed later. So there's these kinds of thought processes, and they go in multiple directions. And we follow the project along the execution because now we have these usually monthly updates of what's happened on the ground. So we have a new reprojection every month for the entire project. And we basically build the entire business around that. So we have now a family of products. One of them is that core forecasting for a single project that tells you what's going to happen, how's it going to go, and what options can you build on top of it. And then you can scale it up. If you can do it for one project at speed, you can do it for a portfolio. So utilities are very much in this world, or data center owners that end up building multiple data centers, contractors that have multiple projects going at the same time. You just look at what's your aggregate profile.
Right. Interesting. So, so it sounds like you're using more analytic AI as opposed to generative AI. Is that right then?
We do a number of things. So, we've had a research team since day one that actually also does fundamental research in AI and machine learning. So we ended up building different types of models. We have a special type of machine learning that we use for the forecasting. And then on top of that, we have our own language models and AI agents that do for example, reporting. Right? Reporting is an incredibly big thing in this discipline called project controls, which is a neat part of project management. A project controls analyst spends most of their time doing reporting. And they do reporting based on the risk, the progress, what is the new cost of things. So we built agents and language models that do that automatically. And then on top of that, we built a generative platform to create the schedules. So now we have a new part of the platform where you can just upload some documents, for example, an RFP or a design document, a drawing, and then you get the schedule for how you should execute this. And that's helpful for generating multiple options.
Right.
And so that all came out of our own research. We had to build different types of models. So it's a mix of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've done, so it looks like your database is pretty big. You've got hundreds of thousands of past projects against which you run this. So what kind of cool stuff did you find out?
So there's a few things. We typically don't do much data analysis on a data set. We mostly use it to create the models, but every once in a while we'll take a look. We'll take a peek. So we published two documents that are actually publicly available. One is the state of project delivery, and that was, I think we did it in 2022. I might be wrong about the year in which we did it. But that was looking at generally what are the things that tend to go wrong, and how do they relate in terms of like the amount of weight that they carry with regards to the completion milestone of the project. So we did a big report of that, and it's kind of like if you ask anyone in construction, they'll probably give you the same list off of their gut feeling, right? So like groundworks, excavation, utility diversions, if you have them, are a problem. Permits is the one that everybody always says. And, like even in your, like, without offense, but smaller world of house renovation, and I don't know if you're doing any excavation to do it, but, permits for sure, right?
Yeah.
If you have to go to like the local authority or the HOA, and like, there's always some sort of delay that comes in from that. And the problem is that with those, they're at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're at the beginning, then that creates problems downstream for everything, right? Because then you might have to rebook a subcontractor, and they might tell you, I'm going to have time for 6 months, right? And then all of a sudden you've got like a house that's almost completely renovated, but there's a window that's missing or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you have like the same. Sorry.
No, sorry. I was going to say you would think that if permitting and the government side was the problem, you would think that, well, first of all, the economic cost of a delay is pretty large. And you would think then that the government or those contractors would then, somehow figure out a way to get an expedite process with the government so that you could, keep the rest of the project online, and on track and what have you. And unfortunately, the government doesn't think that way. They just think about, what my budget is, and I'll get to it when I get to it.
Yeah, and especially because permitting is not a central government function almost ever, right? Unless you're building a nuclear reactor or something like that.
Right.
Which, like, sometimes we do deal with those type of projects, right? But usually permitting, even for something like an airport, comes from the city, right? And so what are the interests of the people in that office? What are they trying to do? Either way, the whole point is that, we're trying to focus the attention on those things because they carry a lot of risk and they carry a lot of impact. You also have the other end of the project, which is like, commissioning, testing. This is true more for engineering type projects. So you think of, power, energy, data centers, I guess airports as well, but like you have like commissioning, testing, bringing systems online. Those also carry enormous amounts of risk. So we put this in the report, and like we probably will do another one relatively soon. We're actually building into our product a data analyst engine. So any client that we get have their own historical data set of past projects that they upload in. And right now, that is mostly only used to train the model for that client. Right? So we have the base model that then gets fine-tuned for each client, and we fine-tune using their data so it learns about their performance of doing things. But we're building in a data analyst agent where you could go and ask these questions. And actually what I want to do is get the data analyst agent to start making these kinds of reports proactively for each client, right? So then you don't have a generic industry one that's done on the whole data set. You have one for each client. So like you have how good is, I'll pick someone who's not a client, Amazon building data centers, and what are their performance gaps and what are their recurring problems is going to be different than someone that's building a railway or a gas pipeline or whatever.
Yeah. So there's a lot of myths around AI, and AI can, is hyped as the magic solution for everything. And so when you're talking to folks, what do you see as having to kind of debunk the different myths about AI?
So I'm seeing like it's very bimodal. I see two types of reaction, right? And this is probably more like it's definitely less true in marketing. It's definitely more true in construction. There's a lot more AI hate in construction than anywhere else I've seen, including agriculture. And so we launched this product where you can generate a schedule, right? But there is also very large group of professional schedulers in the world, right? So a professional scheduler, at the professional scheduling conferences, I've heard so many times, scheduling is an art. Nobody can learn it. It cannot be taught. You have to do it through 20 years of experience. And you can't set up a school to teach scheduling. Therefore, you cannot get AI to do scheduling. And gut instinct reaction is, okay, I mean, scheduling is difficult to get right because there's so many variables that go in, but we teach brain surgery, we teach rocket science, we teach all sorts of other things, which, no offense, tend to be more complicated than scheduling. So there's this, I'm going to maybe call it denial of like, AI, no, it's BS. I don't want to hear about it. La, 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 la. It doesn't exist, right? And there's a lot of people in that category. If you think about, the stereotypical adoption curve,
right.
I think if you take the adoption curve on AI for the entire world, construction fits in the laggard side of the curve. And so these are the laggards within the laggard curve, right? And then you have almost no one in the middle right now. And then you have the early adopters, super enthusiastic, which sometimes get unhealthy the other way. And this is a problem with large language models specifically. And there's this saying, which is like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? Which I think if you haven't done any formal training in machine learning, that's what large language models are. Because all of a sudden, there's a machine that speaks English to you about anything that you want to talk to it about.
Right.
And it is very easy to fall into the trap where just because an LLM is giving you an answer that, I use the term cosplaying, an answer that's cosplaying a good answer doesn't mean that it is capable of doing the thing that you asked it to.
Right.
And so for anyone who, and like I'm not suggesting that people should do formal training just to be able to use an LLM, but you then end up with over enthusiasm where people saying, oh, like the LLM told me about the risks on the project just because I typed the prompt of like, what are the biggest risks on a rail project into ChatGPT without giving it any other data, any other information, and it gave me a list of 10 things. Great. Risk assessment on $100 billion railway done. And so you end up in like also that type of problem. And like those are very different types of problems, right? But I think the solution for both of them is time and education, right? So like if you need to get something out of an LLM, you need to put information into it in some way. And this is effectively what deep research is doing in ChatGPT, is putting actual information into the LLM, right? By searching. And also knowing that actually a lot of things that humans did 5 years ago can be at the very least sped up 10 times faster, right? If we're talking about, white collar jobs in construction, bricklaying and the physical work, not yet.
Yeah. Well, and they're, potentially robots at some point, but we're, not even close to that. But certainly on the white collar side, and AI is either going to, speed things up, make things fast, make things better. You're going to have the challenge of what do you do with all of these employees, and to some extent, we're starting to see that Microsoft let go of a lot of people, and so a lot of programmers. So it's possible that was due, in part to AI and AI programming. So we talk about replacing jobs. What have you seen as it relates to construction and project management?
So I haven't seen any jobs get replaced yet. The reason why we launched the scheduling AI is mostly because we have the opposite problem. So because nobody's training schedulers because it's being very highly gate kept, then there's not enough schedulers. And so I keep seeing people saying like, there's not enough schedulers in the world. What are we going to do? I cannot find anyone. And so the idea is if you can get every scheduler to be a 10x scheduler by giving them a tool where,
right,
the act of scheduling and drawing a Gantt chart is very manual right now.
Right.
There's a tool called Primavera P6, which is now owned by Oracle, which means that will never get developed any further. And you're drawing the lines on the Gantt chart, right? And then you're drawing the lines to connect to the lines. And this is probably like on the extreme side, but there's a nuclear project in the UK that has, for one project, 300 schedulers. Right? Just to develop and maintain the schedule. These are full-time.
Wow.
So if you can actually like remove that manual work, like drawing the line, but like actually type, I want this, and then you do the edits in a way like I want to change these durations, or this sequence isn't what I want to do. I want to do it in a different way, or change my construction method to offsite fabrication. You can do a couple of things that are really cool. One is all of a sudden you've scaled up the scheduler so that they're not just operating the P6 software, but they're also just people that are thinking about planning deeply. Right? And that's where the value comes in from the human, is thinking about how should we build this. But also you get the scale up bonus of, whereas nowadays it takes 6 months to develop an initial schedule for a project. What if you could do it in a day? Right? If you can do it in a day, you can do a different version per day for 2 weeks, have 14 different versions, and then choose which one is less risky, is faster, whatever your targets are, right? And so we're going in that direction. There is notionally the risk that this is potentially replacing some junior schedulers, but those junior schedulers don't exist, so we're not replacing them, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
I think in software development, you have a very different problem, right? Because there's so many software engineers in the world, and AI tools, we use Cursor, we use Devin, we use a lot of them internally. What they're doing is they're replacing the bottom layer of the career path, right? So I am not going to replace my staff engineers or my senior engineers, but and this is a constant thought even in my head as CTO of a software company. Actually, this is stuff that we would have asked an intern to do or a junior to do, and now I can get an agent to do it to a point where the senior engineer only has to do the same amount of supervision that they would have done for an intern, that means that I'm probably hiring less interns, maybe not this year, but next year, right?
Yeah. Which, is a challenge. I mean, because that actually is my last question is what advice do you give a new upcoming person, in your case, a scheduler? What advice do you give them so that they can break in and actually get some experience so that they can become a staff scheduler or a full-time, person?
Yeah, and it's difficult advice to give, right? Because like, and maybe I'm going to reframe it into software engineering as well, because that's probably more relevant for more of the audience. But if we're starting to see the disappearance of the entry level layers of a career, right? And this is true in law as well, right? So like AI in law is entirely text-based, right? So the writing was on the wall from day one. The law profession was going to be changed, right? But if you have, the work that your junior clerk would do would be like collect an enormous amount of documents, read through them, create a summary, and pick the ones that matter. I've just described what most people use LLMs for now.
Yeah.
Right? So
right.
Start seeing the disappearance of these levels. What needs to happen is that and those levels exist because that's building the capability for that person to then be at the level after that, right? So like your junior software engineer writes small features, so then they can think about bigger features modularly, right? So what we'll have to do is we'll have to, we cannot function as a society if all of a sudden everyone who comes out of college is unemployed and they don't have a path to being employed.
Right.
As well as, we're going to run out of senior engineers and senior schedulers or senior lawyers, whatever they're called. So we need to like push that extra layer back into education, right? Which is kind of what happens with medicine for different reasons, right? But like a junior doctor is still someone who's had a lot of practice. And the reason for it is because the cost of a mistake is enormous in medicine, right? So you push into education as much experience as possible, right? And this is why medical degrees and medical doctorates take so much longer, because they have all these practice periods. And so we're probably going to end up in a situation like that, but not because the cost of a mistake is so high, but because that experience is now something that an AI can do. And so then we'll have the new junior becoming the old senior.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then you have to think like, okay, what then appears at the top of that? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I wish I could keep on going. I've got 100 more questions, but we're kind of a little bit out of time. So Alan, where can folks reach you and reach your company?
Yeah. So the company is called Nplan, NPLAN. You can find us nplan.io is probably the best place. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Alan Mosca. That will be probably the easiest place. Okay. Yeah. Any questions, ideas, heckles, more than happy to receive them.
Fantastic. Well, this has been great. It's interesting to talk to a couple of different industries and understand what's going on there and how things are different that way. So, but in any case, thank you so much. And for the audience, certainly please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on AI and marketing. And definitely go to marketingmachine.prorelevant.com and download some information on my upcoming book. Alan, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Guy. Good to be here.
Yep, thank you.